How many speeches do you all want to give this year? Just go ahead, blurt out some answers.
7.
10.
Okay. Excellent. You're in the right place. My work will be very, very easy. I can help you get those 5 speeches, or I can help you get 150 speeches. It all depends on what you're looking for out of your Toastmasters experience. For me, my Toastmasters Odyssey actually started out about 6 years ago. And that is, I was at a motivation day at the Nutter Center. And I looked down and saw those speakers out on stage, the professional speakers that tour the country and the entire world, and I knew I wanted to be there. I just didn't know how to get there. Well, one day, a friend of mine invited me to a Toastmasters meeting, and I took her up on it, and we had Gary Mull speaking. If you've ever seen Gary Mull speak, he was as good as any of the people down on the stage at the Nutter Center. And I said, wow, I want to learn how to speak like that. Fast forward about a year, I was at a District 40 conference. Darren LaCroix was the speaker at that conference. And of the audience of about 300 people, he had them completely mesmerized. You could have heard a pin drop. Exactly what you would expect from a world champion of public speaking. But what you wouldn't expect was the next day's session. It was a Sunday morning and there were only 75 of us. And Darren LaCroix was up at the front and he had a little tremor in his left hand. You would not have seen it unless you were sitting in the very front row. I was dumbfounded. Darren LaCroix was as nervous speaking to 75 people as I was. And then he started talking about stage time. Stage time, stage time, stage time. And that is, if you want to become a professional speaker or develop that level of skill, you need to speak between 75 and 150 times a year. At that time, it took me 5 hours to write a speech and deliver it. I started doing the math. Between 350 to 750 hours. Like a part-time job. Nobody has that kind of time, do we? It's hard enough to find 3 or 4 hours a week just to get out and keep practice and speaking, and that's just going to meetings. So what I knew I had to do was develop a method that would help me write speeches a lot faster. And that method that you're going to receive today is called RIVETS. Recent events, interests, values, errors, and tried and successful. Recent events, interests, values, errors, and tried and successful. Now, as we go through the rivets, I'm going to tell you how to generate a lot of great content from sources you might not have thought of. But then I'll also take you through how to organize that content into a speech that's going to hit home with your audience. But first of all, let's talk about the rivets. Recent events. Our life is so chock full of content. Going to the store can be a speech. I was reminded of this when I was taking a vacation with my wife, my sister, and my mother down to St. Martin, St. Thomas, and the Bahamas. It was a cruise, and we flew into Orlando. Now, my sister had an arrangement to rent a car, and she wanted us to go ahead and drive even though she would pay for it. The problem was, Enterprise wanted to charge an extra $50 and an extra $10 a day for a driver. And so it just made a lot more sense for Lorelei and I to get the car in our name. Well, we needed it for 2 days to run around Orlando, and then it was going to be in the parking garage for the whole rest of the cruise. So we didn't want to spend $25 a day for insurance when we have the State Farm deductible, so we decided not to buy that rental car insurance. Well, you all may know what's coming. That next morning, somebody either wasn't paying attention or they saw a new car and it was spiked, but they had opened their door as hard as they could into my door and put a big old dent in that door. All I could see when I was looking at that door is that I was out the $1,000 State Farm deductible. And really wishing that I had bought the insurance. But it was also my wife and I's anniversary. And so I had to get my mind out of that mindset and into enjoying Epcot Center that day and then going down for the cruise. It took me about half an hour to set my mind right. And we had a fabulous cruise. But then when I got back to that parking garage, I remembered the dent in that door. I'd almost forgotten about it. And as we got closer and closer to the airport, my stomach just tensed up because I knew that I was going to have to answer for that. And as we pulled into the parking garage, my heart rate was about 160. The guy is walking around the car with his clipboard, taking notes, taking that little receipt out of his printer, hands it to me and says, "Thank you for choosing Enterprise, Mr. Hall. Have a nice day." Yeah. Talking about moments of grace. Those are the moments that make for great stories and great speeches. Other things that make for great speeches are interests. That is, with the stuff that you like anyway. Why? Because the passion in speaking about your interests is going to go right through to the audience. We had a woman pastor at my church, and she used to give some wonderful sermons. But the most amazing sermon I ever heard was on crocheting. Crocheting? Well, doesn't that exclude half the men of the audience? No. Actually, what she did is she talked about how God weaves our lives together. And as she was giving that sermon, she was crocheting. Nobody ever forgot that sermon. Now, one of the things that took me the longest in writing speeches, when I was doing them at 5 hours at a time, was doing the research for the speeches. Right? Don't we research our speeches, want to give the very best content? Well, the good news is that when you're researching what you're interested in, you're interested in it. It's fun. But the other thing is you collect so much information on what you're interested in, you can allocate that across several different speeches, and instead of taking 5 hours to research a speech, maybe it only takes 1, once you've divided all that research across 5 speeches. When you're interested, you will be able to bring that interest through to your audience, and you may get them interested in the topic too. Like the pastor had temporarily got me interested in crocheting, which lasted about an hour.